I think also another set of things that are about to go down the drain within the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, as our knowledge of genetics increases, is the idea that groups of people are equal. And I don't care what groups you're talking about here. In the States, we get first upset about race, and then we get upset about gender. Hell, why not get upset about the differences between Italians and Dutchmen? There are differences between all kinds of groups that exist that we can't change, and that also is going to be done. Well, at that point, it seems to me the conservatives have a particular kind of role to play, because the moral center of the view of the left has been that if you see inequalities among groups, if you see certain kinds of outcomes, that these can be fixed, and that group outcomes should be the same. If it were to become scientifically indefensible to take that position, if it were to become simply the same way as you can no longer say that the sun revolves around the earth, if you could no longer say that men and women should be equally represented in the sciences, to raise an issue that was particularly important to Larry Summers, if you could no longer defend that proposition, you have a central linchpin of moral philosophy of the left that has gone south. At that point, I think it is essential for conservatives, with what I think has been a much more realistic appraisal of human nature, to come forward and say, yes, there are genetically determined aspects of human nature. Yes, there are differences among groups. And what does that mean in terms of public policy? It means that we must morally, as an imperative, treat people as individuals. And we look at the person across the table from us and we treat that person who he is or who she is without regard to their membership in any group, without regard to anything except what we see before us. What worries me is that principle, which was so central to the founding of the Republic, and central to the founding of the Republic by men who were very realistic about the limits of human nature, has been lost on both the left and the right to a large degree. That there has been an idealism of libertarians which has been just as troubling as the idealism of the left. In my own experience, that recognition came about with the bell curve, where Ed Crane of the Cato Institute was just as unhappy about the bell curve as all sorts of people on the left, because libertarians would really like to think that, gee, our fate is within our own control and we can be whatever we want to be if we try hard enough. Just as the left would like to say, gee, if we only had the right social interventions, we could do all of these great things. So in that regard, if we're talking about political implications of the things we've been talking about tonight, I think they are real. I think they are about to become urgent within the next 10 or 15 years. And I think the responsibility of the people of the right is not to come up with any new bright ideas, but to cleave to the old. That individualism is the way a society should be organized, that individual freedom should be its guiding principle, and that we deal with each other not as members of groups, but as individuals dealing with other individuals. And that constitutes my haphazard first questions to the panel and first topics to raise with them.
This question is for Charles Murray. I was just wondering, when you're talking about, we find these differences among people and among groups, and then you say that we should treat them, you use a couple different terms about kind of
Individuals.
democratically, individually, but they're in ethical ways. If this Darwinian story, is true, I mean, how do we ground those things? Getting back to this kind of concern that Ron Bailey was talking about, this kind of angst. I mean, how do you personally ground? In other words, why not just say, well, we shouldn't treat them as individuals. We should treat them as part of a group. I mean, where it can't be found in nature. So where do we find that? I just don't. For you personally, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's a matter of personal philosophy that I do not want people to look at me and assign me a variety of group memberships and think they know one damn thing about me. They don't. Why should I do that with anybody else?
There's no cosmic imperative. It's just like I wouldn't want them to do that to me. You understand? In other words, it's a preference rather than a norm.
It's a hell of a good preference, is my view.
I agree. I agree.
But you see, I don't know what I guess if I get back to natural rights, and which I do think come very close to being a norm, which in my view, human beings are born with ownership of their own bodies, and the rest of the natural rights argument, which I think is a norm. It seems to me that if you start from those principles, it becomes, in some very closely related way, unethical to treat other people as anything except the individuals who they are. So I can't do it for you right now, but I think there's probably a line to be drawn from very basic premises about natural rights to treating people as individuals under the circumstances I described.
Could I just say that I think that's hopelessly idealistic, Charles?
I've been accused of that before, yes.
And may I be the voice of reason, so to speak. One other way that I like to look at it is that what we have done is we can look back over, we've had lots of examples of other societies where people were not treated equally, where there were slaves, where women were treated as in purdah, where they were kept, could not own property, had no rights. And we look, and there was something amazing happened in the Western world, and there are lots of different theories about this, where people started treating people better over time, and they started treating them more as equals over time. And what did we see? That we saw the flowering of the technologies that we see here. The population grew enormously in the West first because of this. It was, in a certain sense, an evolutionary success. And more people wanted to move to those societies, and more people were choosing those kinds of societies over time. Now, I think that means that it is fitted to human nature, and that we have discovered that as a fact. And that's why that norm works. If you want to go back, the norm works because people prefer it, not because the other societies were successful in some sense. They were successful, they persisted, they eventually ended up as our society, but let's face it, up until 2 centuries ago, the natural state of humanity was abject poverty. Fortunately, 1 billion people no longer live in abject poverty, and with good hope in the end of the 21st century, everybody will be out of abject poverty.
Yes, I just wanted to say that while the principle of legal equality and constitutional equality is a very sound one, which I don't disagree with, I very strongly doubt, Charles, that you can treat people as simply as individuals and never as members of groups. And I don't think you should. I think it would be foolish of you to do so. For example, you're an elderly widow. You have a room to let in your house. 2 people come to look at the room, and they both like it and they both want to rent it. One of them's a young black guy with dreadlocks, and the other one's an elderly Japanese woman. Which one are you going to rent it to, Charles?
No, that's fair. You are faced with decisions with incomplete information. All right? And so when you have incomplete information, you bring to bear the best bets you can. And that's true if you're picking stocks or whether you're picking people to rent rooms to, or whether you're playing poker hands. But that doesn't negate the nature of the obligation. So that, for example, got 2 people coming up to try to rent my room, and under the normal amount of time and latitude I have to interview them, I will use group characteristics to influence my decision. Absolutely right. Does that mean that it would not be better in a moral sense if I could treat them as individuals? No. It just means that there are exigencies in life, and you have to deal with the exigencies. It doesn't change the moral principle.
Isn't it also true that when you have more information, say when you're interviewing people for jobs, that just because somebody is from a group with a certain, say, need and intelligence, that says nothing about the particular individual sitting in front of you from that group, which is to say you can't tell anything about an individual's abilities from the group to which they belong.
But in the presence of incomplete information, you then make bets. So that I was delighted when I went to see my new cardiologist and found out that he was East Asian. And it was young. Because young is good, medicine, they've been keeping up the literature. East Asian is good, work their asses off that are smart. You know, and I was making stereotypical generalizations, but in the presence of incomplete information, that was better. I had better odds than if I had used that.
Somewhat related to Charles Murray's point about he accepts if we have limited information, we have to make decisions. Well, the fact is, human beings always, all the time, have only limited information, and we're required to make decisions about all kinds of things, from getting up in the morning to fighting great wars. So to have a morality based on unlimited information is a morality which sounds nice, but has nothing to do with human nature.
But it's an immorality that can affect behavior. The question asked earlier, when I'm sitting across the desk from somebody, if they may be a member of a group, but I don't know what their ability is, it was absolutely true. That it's also true I can make statistical probabilities, but if I'm hiring an employee, and that person's sitting across the table, and there are ways for me to acquire more information, there are A, moral reasons to say that's the appropriate thing to do, as opposed to saying I'm going to go with statistics, and B, there are also very empirical, practical reasons to get more information, because the accuracy of your decision will be much higher. So you take the combination of the empirical advantages and also the moral appropriateness of gaining more information, and I think you've got a workable way for making the world a better place.
You're saying more, but not complete.
Never complete.